Shut up.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of That Early Childhood Nerd. I'm Heather Burnt-Santy, and today I've got Richard Cohen.
Hello.
And Michael Huber. Mike Huber.
Only my mom calls me that,
So
but I am
apparently
at
I'm
my
your
mom's
mom now?
house, so maybe that's why you thought it.
Finish your vegetables.
At least I didn't throw in Elizabeth. That's my go-to middle name for any kind of full name scolding. And but, really, as yes, Richard, I should be scolding. So I don't know where that was directed at you, Mike. I'm sorry. So hey, we're going to do a part two. Bethany and Sam are going to join us for the rest of this conversation of the Can of Worms book, but neither of them are able to be here. So you just get these guys.
Yay.
And welcoming Mike, who wasn't able to be part of the part one. So we're looking at this Can of Worms book again by Nick Terrones, Fearless Conversations with Toddlers. I'm just going to jump in and share a quote, and this is on page 77 of the book, that I think sort of summarizes the thoughts we've had for this part two as we've been planning for it. So, and if not, we'll just do what we do with other quotes and move on and ignore it. So Nick writes, what if a toddler is pre-verbal? Can they comprehend any of these complex questions and topics? What language do I use? How much is too much? What will families think? How do I balance families' values, beliefs, and cultural practices with my own? It was a big turning point for me when I decided that instead of letting myself get bogged down by these questions, I would use them as catalysts to rise to the challenge of claiming the power of my role as an educator, the power to take up issues that matter and to rewrite the story of education in our society. Which is a big way of looking at a toddler's question about a worm.
Right.
But sort of, I feel like encapsulates this idea that some of us accept and some of us don't, that we have a tremendous opportunity to impact generations in an authentic way. You know, those are words that we throw around a lot. You know, the children are our future and all we've got our, you know, we can get our hand in there, but this real idea that if we can tackle some of these complicated things authentically and honestly and openly with children that we're working with, we may very well see a generation of children a new generation of adults who don't get freaked out about questions about gender identity, or don't have to deal with some of the, the elements of racism that we're working through now, and can really impact democracy, which I know is something both of you have big thoughts about. So, what do you want? Somebody say something about all that.
Well, I think a lot of people in our field underestimate the power they have in other people's lives and in young children's lives. Just because you can't see the fruits of your labor, like democracy or, whatever that might be, it doesn't mean you didn't play a role in that. And I'm here in this field because I believe that our role is incredibly valuable, even if we can't always verify that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think when I think about our role, I mean, in a way, it's that idea. Can I trust relationships? What does it mean to be in a community? Yep. Do I have a place? Do I belong in my community? Or am I just sort of there and people ignore me? Or do I get to use my power and take over everyone else? All of those basic lessons are define what what these children will think of as democracy or as being in community, and whether democracy has any part in that, and so we definitely add to that, or that's not even the right word. We're a big part of that because we're the ones who kind of set that tone. Yeah. Regardless, if one kid starts hitting another, what do? Our reaction is going to kind of tell them everything of what the society is supposed to be like. And it might not always match what we think society should be like, right, if we're not careful or reflective.
So can we do a quick definition of what we're talking about when we're talking about democracy in this context? Because I can also imagine someone, and I'm thinking again about the gender identity specific parts of this book. I definitely have in my life at one time been this person and know other people who feel like
Mhm.
we're getting too liberal and it's a threat to our democracy. And so they're hearing us
Right.
talking about two things that don't connect for them, if that makes sense. Like,
Yeah.
you
So
know,
maybe, yeah, I was, Richard and I were just talking while you were sort of setting up about democracy, and I was comparing, before democracy, there was this idea of the divine right of kings. And whatever the king said was reality, right? That, could wish it. And democracy challenged that notion. And democracy said that if people are allowed to get information and talk to each other, that they can make decisions. And that those decisions, part of democracy is that it's never set. What was decided when the Constitution was created isn't what we should be doing in 2021. In fact, the whole idea was that the theory behind was like just enough safeguards, but then letting it change. And so we shouldn't be thinking the same way we did in 1850 or 1950. And in 2021, even the stuff I'm going to say that I think about classrooms will be different in 5 years. Not because I was wrong necessarily. Sometimes some things I'll probably say, oh, I was really misguided, or I made a mistake, whatever. But a lot of it will just be, oh, I know more now. I know more now, so I can do better. And that's what democracy has. That's the promise of democracy, that it's a process. Democracy is never a set outcome. And toddlers are totally all about that. Like, they don't mind that they don't quite get it. If you tell a toddler just about the binary, if you told the toddler, oh, Jay is now using she, we use she for Jay now, and if it had been he, and toddlers would be, oh, okay, right? Like,
Right.
no, no problem. It's the parents who find out, or who might get upset or something. But I think democracy has a similar thing to sort of the toddlers, in that sense of they're okay with things changing. They're used to learning something new every day. And adults are like, no, it can't be this, because in 7th grade, I learned something different. So therefore it can't be this way.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
that's my long-winded answer.
that's a good one. Thanks.
Toddlers are the definition of change, right?
Yeah.
And dynamism. They're just completely in transition in their lives, in any moment, in terms of process versus product. Those little ones are in process 24/7, I feel like. But the other thing I would say I was thinking of, Heather, when you were asking your question, was, I'm just trying to gather my thoughts here. I would love for your listeners and watchers to think along two tracks in this conversation, kind of as I was just doing, listening to Mike and you. One is, okay, these three people are talking about young children, but two is, this could very well be a conversation about we adults in American society. And this little bit about democracy is, you could totally put our current events into this conversation. So what I mean by that is, I'm thinking about some high-level leaders in our country who are working very hard to make it so that only some Americans can vote, right?
Yep.
And there's some Americans that they believe don't deserve a vote, shouldn't have a vote, whatever their reasons are. But, as we're sitting here talking about what is democracy, it means everybody gets a vote. And then the outcome reflects that, right? And so I see it playing out in our adult world. But also what I think it means, just building on what Mike and Heather were saying, what I also think it means in terms of, and what Nick Terrones, the author of Can of Worms, was saying, is underneath everything we've just been talking about is an even more foundational belief, which is that young children are capable, competent human beings. They're not sponges waiting to soak us up. They get a vote in terms of the world of our classroom. They are just as valid a citizen and a vote maker as I am, even though I'm 50 years older than them, right? And so that's what democracy looks like in an early childhood classroom. This morning on Facebook, I saw, I don't know, do you all know, and I hope she's watching this, Shirley Devano Rampel?
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's an amazing early educator.
Yeah.
And
Hi,
this
Shirley.
morning, Right? Hi, Shirley, we love you. And I love what you posted this morning, Shirley, because you posted a picture of your family childcare home, your family daycare home. And you had a picture of a camping tent and camping supplies. And you said, I'm all about the yes. The children all wanted to do something about camping. And now look what I've done. I've put up a tent and all these things. That's democracy in action
Mhm.
in an early childhood setting.
Yeah.
What's not democracy in action in a childhood setting is, I know you're interested in playing over there, but I need you to sit down and tell me if you can write the letter, show me if you can write the letter B. And can you jump on one foot? And all of these things I have to record before you go in order to get to kindergarten.
Mhm.
That's not democracy.
Well, so and I think that a big piece of this conversation about democracy and about our contribution and our place is just the idea that everyone has a voice, and we also all have a responsibility to be open to those other voices. Not certainly there are voices I don't agree with and that I wish would stop, but they all in a democracy have that. And so if we're shutting down a child's question because we're more comfortable with a binary view of gender, for whatever reason, whether it's just because we're not confident enough to articulate a different way of thinking, or it's just habit, or it's your personal belief, or we shut down a conversation where a child's asking a question about another child's hair or tone of, color of skin. That all, every time we shut down something like that, it sends a message about the voice, about that other person's voice. Right. And I'm hard pressed to come up with a good enough reason that would be okay and wouldn't need to be examined. It's difficult for me to say, okay, yeah, that's a good enough reason to avoid a question that takes you out of your comfort zone about gender. Right. Because that little in the moment non-reaction or big reaction impacts so much and continues to impact. So maybe it's difficult, but the right thing isn't always easy to do.
Yeah.
Well, and all of us in this last year and a half, maybe in the last 5 years, have at some point or another on social media or in real life, we have experienced having our voices shut down by somebody else, because we're in such a polarized society right now, right? So everyone listening and watching to this knows how that feels and knows that it doesn't sit right when all voices don't get to be there. So again, if you believe that toddlers are perfect as they are and valuable and as they are, then remember how it feels to have your voice shut down, and accord the toddlers in your life with the same respect.
And that this brings up for me, because I think this is one of the things that Nick really did brilliantly in the book, and I didn't write down the page. It's around page 26, 27. Yeah, but I believe he said, no, the 3 kids are washing their hands. It was the superhero part.
Right.
And they're talking about, I'm a boy Batman, I'm a girl Batman. And the one boy is, wait, but he has a penis, so he has to be a boy Batman. And the child's like, no, I'm a girl Batman. And Nick doesn't tell them they're wrong. He also doesn't tell them they're right. What he said is, what do you know about that? Or what do you think about it? I don't have the exact quote because I don't have the exact page, but it was that thing of, he turned it to them and they talked to each other. And he said that he knew in his head that they were friends enough that they could trust each other. They weren't just going to start yelling or pushing each other, because that also doesn't, that's not democracy either, right? Just a fist fight isn't democracy.
What?
But thought that they could talk to each other. And the one child said, I'm a girl Batman like my sister. And then for that toddler, then it was, oh, okay. It was enough. Like that he was just looking for a reason, and then he got it. And it wasn't the reason that Nick would have given. But I love that he just sort of turned it around. Well, tell us about that. Or maybe it was that's all
Yeah.
Nick said was tell us about that.
So now I have to look in here because he gives like a 3-step kind of thing.
Yeah, it was before that.
Let me find it.
Right before that chapter.
Yeah.
I was using the electronic copy for
Oh,
this.
yeah.
My
Yeah.
other copy is at home and I'm on the road.
Yeah. So so he offers, and this is on page 52, but he offers a protocol to help guide
Oh,
thinking.
yeah.
And so it's be curious, reflect, engage and expand, and innovate and empower. So being curious about why did that affect me the way it did? What might they really be wondering about? Even just thinking, where will this go if I stay out of it a little bit, which is kind of what you did. And then considering, what did I think was going on? That's the reflect piece. Right. Engage and expand, what other perspectives do I want to consult? And then innovate and empower, what next steps can I take? So one of the things we talked about in part 1 was not having to have the answer, not having to correct or give specific information necessarily, which I think is sort of, I'll say empowering, but also sort of comforting for people like me who don't feel like I have all the answers or know what words or, don't want to say anything wrong. Well, that's easy to do by just sitting back for a minute. And even thinking, I don't, this morning threw me. What do I need to figure out before tomorrow when they all come back in with me? Or a parent might ask a question that takes you in a different direction that way.
Right. And if you do try to give them answers, you get the kids who start to learn that they don't have a voice, right? Giving kids an answer is actually taking away their voice in a way when you think about democracy.
Yeah.
Because I definitely, some teachers I work with, and they they don't want to just ask the question and then, but we've been using video, so they'll see, oh, I was doing it, and then all of a sudden I got to this point where, oh, well, what color is that, or what, you know what I mean? Like it suddenly got to, or the child said something wrong about a sun dog or something like that. I forget what the thing's called. Some atmospheric thing that happens with the sun or something, and the child knew enough about it to say, oh, that tree branch looks like a sundog, and the teacher immediately went to, oh, do we see sundogs in the winter or the summer? I'm thinking, I don't even know the answer. And she's like asking this question. But, afterwards, she's like, oh, that was the wrong thing. I should say, oh, so that reminds you of a sundog. Tell me about that.
Yeah.
Right. Like give it back to the child. Yeah. And instead, and a lot of it, I definitely have to work against that.
Yeah. I think a lot of that has to do with trying to keep ourselves in the moment. Because she might have been thinking of 17 other things that she had to, there's a group of kids, we're going here, then this happens. Yep. And so, just was an autopilot. I think about one day I had this 4-year-old who liked to just come hang out in my office with me. And I would work and he would sit and talk. And I was working and just saying, yeah. And he finally said, I noticed you're not really answering any of my questions.
Yeah,
why are you just saying and it's because I wasn't I wasn't in the moment with him, and I thought I was being polite, but I was being rude.
That's really good,
sort of dehumanizing. So, but it wasn't from any evil intent. I wasn't intending to do anything that would offend him, but when I stopped and reflected, that was about me and not about him.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, for sure. Sometimes it's about the other kids. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Richard.
No. Yeah. I was going to say, I want to give an example of what you all have been talking about that has just occurred to me while I was listening to you talk. Back at the point that Mike said, just because I think your nerd listeners and viewers, might benefit from hearing my thought process, because they might say, oh yeah, I can relate to that. So when you all were talking about, early on, Mike, when you were talking about the 2 kids, and one said, you can't be a girl Batman if you're a boy, or something like that.
Yeah.
And I immediately, so I'm an old Pacific Oaksian, so I immediately put my anti-bias, my antenna went up and my anti-bias bag got pulled out, my bag of tricks. And I thought, well, let's see, how would I respond in that moment to those kids? This is what was happening while I was sitting there nodding and pretending to listen to you. I thought, well, I would say, okay, so you think boys can be girl Batmans, and you think that boys can't be girl Batmans. Could you both, I would say something like, could you both, is it okay for you to each think what you think and still play? And I thought, well, that's a good anti-bias response. Go, Richard. I'm awesome. And then I think that a lot, by the way.
Yeah, we know.
And that you don't have to apply.
Fair enough. I think that too. So
About Richard or about yourself?
About Richard.
oh, Richard, yeah.
Okay, all right.
Oh my God, I've totally forgotten what I said. All this
Sorry.
adulation has made me.
Can we just play together and both be what we want to be and being proud of yourself?
Oh, I didn't ever finish my story.
Yeah, I know.
So then I sat and did what Heather described, which is reflecting, which is a critical piece of probably any profession, but we three can only really speak about early childhood education. And it's the part that often gets missed, is to take the time to reflect. And so I sat here and continued to pretend like I was listening to you two and I was reflecting. And I thought, no, that's a good anti-bias response, Richard. And by the way, I hate people who refer to themselves in third person. But anyway, suddenly I am one.
Just keep talking before you
I
forget
missed
again.
out on Mike's point in the beginning and on Nick's point, which is you've just steamrolled the conversation. And what Nick and Mike said was much more eloquent and simple and to the point, which is just to ask them, what do you think? And let them talk. Right? I was all like, had my teacher hat on and I'm going to facilitate this and explain to them what to do. But in fact, it's so much, the even bigger leap of faith than taking on the can of worms that I was going to take on is to say, I don't even need to take it on. I just need to ask them what they think and let them talk to each other.
Yeah.
You know, now that's democracy in action.
Yeah. And there's a good episode of That Early Childhood Nerd, Nathaniel, NCN, and who else is on that one? Katie
Julie Nicholson.
Julie was on
and
it, yeah.
NCN, did you already say NCN Patel?
Yep. Yeah, and then I just said first name, but yeah, and
Nathaniel
Flynn. And I think it was Nathaniel that made the point of, well, what do you know about that? It was about a cartoon character, right? About I can't think, from She-Ra, but you know, is that, well, what do you like about them? What do you like about them that you say that he's your favorite character, or they're your favorite character? It's a non-binary character. And just opening that up, because like, you know, Nathaniel said, they're like, this was more with school agers, but they're trying to give me a little bit of info so that I can open it up for them, but I don't have to then say, oh yes, you know, they're a non-binary character, I like that too, you know, but more like, tell me what you like about that. Why do you like them, you know? And yeah, it's a huge, and I definitely learned it from Julie and NCN as well. Yeah. So go back to that episode, people.
What about, it is a good episode, except for my parts. That iTunes
I disagree, but
review was spot on when they said I'm boring, but my co-hosts are great. I'm really hanging on to that review from like 3 years ago. Anyway, so what about if the conversation wasn't, I really like that character, what if it was, oh, that character is weird or something like that? Like I think about, so we had a little girl in the preschool one semester who wanted a baby doll and asked someone to hand her a baby doll. So one of the grad students did. And she said, I don't like the brown ones, and put it back in the baby bed and got a white one out. And we could have just sat back and let them kind of, and been curious about the thinking or whatever. But I felt like in that moment, and I want to hear what you guys think, and if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but in that moment, we needed to respond in some way because other children were there. We had a couple of grad students who were women of color that I wanted to make sure they felt sort of protected from that, even though the child was 4. So are there times when we do need to skip that curiosity piece? And
I don't know that it's an either or question.
Yeah.
I think you're going into a binary with the question. But there's also no one right answer. It's not like one answer is right, one answer is wrong. But I wonder about if you did ask, oh, what don't you like about the child? Of course, now you're opening up that they might say the skin color. Yeah. But you could go further with the conversation, right? It could be, oh, I have friends with brown skin, and I have friends with white skin. And, you could start to talk about the different people or whatever. You don't want to point out kids or other adults in the class. Yeah. But, or, because for all you know, they could have said like, oh, there's some of the paint scratched off it could have been something totally different.
Didn't like the outfit that baby had on or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or it could be, well, oh, good, because I like this one, and you could have been
Which is
whatever.
what we did.
Those are the two that would come to me right away.
Yeah.
But Richard, being the more reflective person here, may have
Right.
more answers.
He's probably thought of the right answer while we were talking.
I'm just dipping my toe in reflection. I don't really know how to do it. Oh, now I forgot.
Okay. No. I guess
so-
the reason I
so what
asked
I
is
would say
because I
Okay.
think there maybe are moments when
Oh yeah.
when we need to be more proactive to
Sure.
microaggressions or macro,
Sure.
Those kinds of things. But sorry, go
Well,
ahead.
you may even
No,
have
no,
a
no,
kid who
it's okay.
says, some words that they heard their parent.
Yeah.
If they have a parent who's racist, they're going to bring it into the classroom too. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we
it's
are
a
in Indiana.
really good question.
Well, so here's what I would say. To me, it all comes back to one of the main themes for me of that early childhood nerd, because this word seems to come up very frequently, as it should, which is relationships.
Mhm.
And so if if one of my greatest priorities and values is building relationships with the children and families in my care and getting to know them each individually so that I know how to scaffold each of them individually, right? In other words, how to respond to each of them in the way that's most appropriate and meaningful for them, then this is my long-winded way of answering your question, Heather. Then I know in that moment, who are the kids that are involved right there? Who said that about the doll? Is this a moment then, do I know them well enough to know that it would be meaningful for me to insert myself and start facilitating a conversation about it? Or no, it's better to not interrupt their play, and let's handle this later through a storybook and an art activity, and never even directly relate it to the doll moment.
Yeah.
Right.
That
That's-
innovate
that's
and
all part of
empower
the
step.
judgment you make. That's all
Yeah.
part of the art of
Yeah.
early childhood education, I think.
Man, I was just going to bring up, this reminds me of a meme I read, except I think it was yours, Richard,
Oh,
from
okay.
yesterday.
It reminds you of what?
A
Meme.
meme I read yesterday on Facebook.
Maybe you've heard
I
of
think-
them.
I think it was the Zen Facebook page about
Yeah.
relationships are the best, like for classroom management, the best classroom management technique is to build relationships.
Mhm.
And for all the reasons you just said.
What's interesting is that that's not what it said, Mike. But I
Okay,
love that
good.
that's how that's how your mind remembered it.
Yeah.
Here's what it said. It said the most important classroom management strategy is to like the children in your care.
Oh my gosh, you're
And
right.
I think that's awesome that your mind remembered like as building a relationship with.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, that's
Because
so
it
funny.
is an
Super cool.
active thing, right? Liking children
choice.
has to be active. Yeah.
And you're right. It's funny. I had my phone like too far to reach. I was like, oh, what is the wording? But yeah, I went right to relationship.
It's so
Yay for
far
you.
away.
'Cause
What
I
else?
also think if you
Yeah.
build relationships with the young children in your care, you can't help but like them or
Right.
fall in love with them in a way. You may not always like them moment to moment, but if you know them and they know you, your heart just goes to them.
Mhm.
One of the best advice I ever saw for working with kids who have experienced trauma is to list 5 things you like about them.
Yes.
So you can go back to those even when the times when they're not displaying any of those.
Yeah.
Right.
But I think it's really helpful for teachers because kids know how to push your buttons, and the more they do it, if you aren't actively liking the children and figuring out how to like them, because if you do that, then you build a relationship and all that. But it's easy to get on the other side and not admit it. Like nobody's going to say, well, I hate that kid.
Mhm.
They're going to say, oh, there's something, somebody needs to do something about that kid. We need to get that kid, therapy or whatever. Like we need to refer that child.
Yeah.
Or
That
so they don't
cure-all.
say not like, and at the same time, they're like, why do I get this kid in my room?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, that connects to these fearless conversations too,
Yeah.
because if it's a kid that you feel like you don't like, saying the thing that's difficult for you to respond to, then you're 3 steps backward, back before you
Right.
even get a chance to do anything about it. And There's also an amount of courage that I think it takes to admit that you don't just automatically like every child that comes through your space, and that sometimes you have to be a little bit more proactive about it. That, sorry, it's itchy. The dressing is itchy. I know I keep, those of you listening, I'm sorry. I've got like a bandage on me from surgery yesterday. So what else did you guys want to talk about in this? I know, Mike, you didn't get to be involved at all in the part one. So are there things that you were hoping to be able to
Well, I mean, I
throw out
do
here?
think, I mean, we got into the conversation about the conversation again, which
Yeah.
is good. But I don't know. I mean, there is something about that idea that I think we might have already said this. So just, just ignore me if I did. But
Sure.
like that way that toddlers are very concrete in their thinking, and they may have to explain it in a certain way, like the word boy and the word girl, to mean way more than just the word boy or the word girl. And frankly, I guess that's what our society does as well. It's why people have such a hard time when somebody does something. Well, specifically when a boy, or what the adults think is a boy, is doing something that's associated with girls. Usually we're okay with the reverse.
Right.
Which I think is, I think that's something to call out for sure.
Definitely.
But that idea that toddlers are still, that process is, they're totally okay with, but the way they do it, it will take reflection, and it will take, I think, that open-ended, really let them talk more, because you're probably not going to understand what they're talking about sometimes. I guess that's the, like, part of it. And in a way, I feel like in democracy in general, we often misunderstand each other, because, I mean, I'm curious for people who think that, you're either a boy or a girl, and there's only two genders and it matches genitalia. I'm curious why they, like, how they know it, I guess, is part of it. More importantly, why are they worried that there might be other things that they haven't thought about?
Why is it a scary thing?
Why is it scary? Yeah. Thank you.
Well, I agree, but there's a tiny little thing. I don't know if this is even the right word, but I think how do they know it is a really important question for early childhood professionals, because
how do children know it?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Because before we started recording, Mike was saying young children, especially toddlers, are concrete thinkers, and some people think that means they can't go deep.
Yeah.
And that what you said in that moment there, Mike, really sparked something for me, because I agree with you 100%. And I was sitting here thinking, so how do they know it? They don't remember that they saw someone's genitalia in the bathroom last week. So when they're trying to sort through who's a boy and who's a girl, they're not using that memory. They didn't pay attention. They were busy pooping or whatever, right? So they don't know. How do they know it? They know it because of how we put them in lines of boys and girls, how we respond to, how we use our language around gender, around all the kids in their classrooms. They pay attention to all the kids who play loudly and run around, and all the kids who sit quietly, and they start to build, models, schemas, for gender that are often full of misinformation.
Right. Or how we compliment, what we compliment factors into that too.
Right. Who do I suggest go over in the dress up area, and who do I say, hey, you should go to the block area, you'll have fun. Those are all the things that soak into their little minds that we may not even realize we're doing. And those are the things that's why we do have to reflect, so that we can be awake and aware and be intentional in those little things, because they all add up to those views of the world that young children have. They didn't come up with it on their own yet, because they're concrete thinkers. They're looking to the world around them, and we're the ones who set the stage for that world.
We had a little boy several years ago in one of our classrooms who, if he could just wear this long blonde wig that we had in dress up, he would participate in anything you asked him to do throughout the day. But if someone made a a fuss about him wanting to wear that wig, which his dad did make a fuss. Or there was like a ballet skirt kind of thing. If he could wear those things, he was happy, he could do whatever. But if not, he really, really struggled.
Mhm.
And it wasn't the other children who noticed or made any big deal about that. It was the adults and their reaction that really determined, which then of course sends a message to all those other children. But they were just like, oh, that's just B. He's just,
Right.
he's happy in a wig. And they would bring it to him and things, but the adults who were uncomfortable with it made it really hard.
To me, that goes back to the schemas that I was mentioning a second ago. So we adults have a schema in our head called wig, and we have all sorts of association with the concept of wig. And for the most part, we associate it with females. And living in a patriarchal, misogynistic society,
Yay.
being a female, yay, being a female is the worst thing you can be. So some of us get really excited, really upset, because we think our boy is aligning himself with the worst thing you could be, a female. But when you put yourself in the boys, see the world through the boy's eyes, he doesn't have that schema yet. He's still a concrete thinker, right? We have no idea why he's in that wig. Maybe it feels like a weighted blanket around him.
Yeah.
Make him feel safe and secure. Or maybe he just wants to try being a girl for a while. I mean, it literally could be that.
Yeah.
But so then it's, why is that a bad thing to be? And it's not. If he wants to be a dragon, he can. Why are we
Exactly,
so if he wants to be a girl?
Yeah.
It's just imagination. It's just creativity.
For some,
And sometimes it's more than that too,
Yeah.
which I think is important to point out, that because I have a similar story, and I was just in Brooklyn and visited my old school where this happened back in the late 90s, I guess. But a child
time.
always wore a skirt, a sequined skirt
His
on their
hair.
head. Yep. And then carried a Barbie around. And in fact, how I finally got them to toilet train was to make a little potty chair for Barbie. And then they were willing to sit. But there was one time when these two kids there's this fuss over in one area. I go over what's going on and say, oh, they said that boys aren't allowed in here. And I look over and see the one child, and I was just like, well, what about what I'll call it? Let's just call him Richard. Well, what about Richard? He's a boy. And the girl turns to me, one of the girls, and no, I've seen his true self. He's a girl.
Oh boy.
And that's where my self-reflection came in afterwards of like, what did I just made this like assumption? But I had the opposite thing, because then the parents' only question was, will they, their child, be able to handle any bullying they might get as they go off to kindergarten?
Yeah.
So that was like a completely different. And what I loved too is mom and grandma had like close cropped hair, but
He needed the big,
it was the big wig to like, the shiny wig to be the, but I do know that child, it did turn out to be more, but that's that whole, it starts with imagination. And then like, wait a minute, this is more than it for me.
And we don't have to know that in the moment.
And we don't have to know.
We just need to know what could be a sort of damaging response to it without having to know the exact thing that's going on.
Yeah. Before that, I used to tell parents,
Richard.
kids pretend to be lions.
Yeah.
And we don't worry about it because they don't really turn into lions. And then afterwards I realized, but the difference is with this one, sometimes it turns out they figured something out. So anyway, sorry, Richard.
Yeah.
No, it's okay. I just lost my train of thought.
Sorry.
I was going to say that what you just said, Heather, reminded me of what Nick wrote in the book. Oh, I know. You said you have to know if what you're saying is damaging or not.
Yeah.
Right? And one of the great things I thought, as a 56-year-old man who's continuing to learn and grow and get my mind around the non-binary world and truth of the society that I'm in, and I still struggle with that sometimes. When at the beginning of his book, he talks about the girl and boy thing, and I thought, oh yeah, I would have said that too, right? Boys have penises, girls have vaginas, blah 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 blah. And then he reminded me, oh no, actually, like, hey, Richard, wake up! It's 2021. It's actually there's a lot more gray than that binary you just described, and so I feel like, so this is all in response to what you said, Heather, which is you have to know whether what you're saying is going to, how did you say it, hurt someone?
Probably damage,
Right.
do damage, maybe.
Damage, yeah.
Right. And I think many of us do it out of ignorance. Like in that moment, if I had been there, I would have said that and not realized that it might have hurt anyone.
Mhm.
But by reading his book and realizing that he realized that what he said could have hurt them in the long run by pushing their minds into more binary thinking than they needed to be,
Mhm.
he was able to take a step further than I could have.
Yeah.
So some of us do that. It doesn't mean we're bad people. It just means we always have that opportunity to go back and think about what we did and do it differently next time.
Yeah. One of the things I really appreciated about the Supporting Gender Diversity book that, Mike, you referred to the episode with those authors, is that they spend a lot of time in the opening couple of chapters talking about the hurt that can come, and it doesn't matter what our intention was, but also that we shouldn't wait until we have a child in our space who's showing us signs that maybe they're feeling more like a boy than a girl,
it's
or
more
whatever it
that
might be.
Being prepared that somebody might be.
Right.
You
It's like
don't know.
constantly working to be able to talk in those ways and respond in ways and plan for things that are supportive, because you don't know.
Yeah.
There
My
may be
own
a child
child-
who's not showing
Yeah.
you by a wig or whatever.
Yeah.
Right.
My own child is a teenager and is non-binary. And they will still talk about in kindergarten, somebody had a birthday and there were cupcakes with Mickey Mouse pin or, little decorations and Minnie Mouse decorations. And so the parent had asked the teacher already how many boys, how many girls, and had the appropriate amount. My child can still talk about it because they were like, but I just want a chocolate one. And I don't care. Like, I don't know what this Minnie Mouse, Mickey Mouse, didn't have a word for it yet, but knew I'm neither Mickey nor Minnie.
I just want chocolate.
I just want chocolate.
Yeah.
And
That's a lifestyle choice for me.
Right. Now I need a cupcake. Sorry.
Yeah.
Don't mean
Sorry
to
about
diminish your
But
story.
remembering that, like being able to, like, even remember it from back then. And
Yeah.
frankly, one of their toddler teachers was Nathaniel Flynn.
Oh my
So-
gosh.
They did have some, and in fact, even as a teenager, started talking about the trans care providers they had. Especially, there's another provider who was non-binary, and they used "they" for pronoun. That, I said, yeah, whatever, explained what I thought non-binary was at the time. I'd be embarrassed to remember exactly what I said, but my child immediately said, "Oh, that's like me." That's how they came out, was to describe something from 10 years earlier or whatever. Like, kids remember it. And so that caveat is, if you act as if somebody in your care might be, in the same way that you don't know if there's a child who's gay or lesbian, when they grow up it'll be more obvious, as a 5-year-old you don't know, but if they don't think that that's even a possibility,
right,
that's the thing that we can provide, is that there's possibilities. We're and maybe none of the kids in that class are trans or are LGBT.
Yeah.
I mean, chances are at least one
somebody
of them is.
Statistics are not
But,
in my favor.
but at the same time, if they meet another person, they're going to still be more open because, oh, I remember, my teacher was talking about that.
Exactly.
So it also opens it up that way. I think that came up in the same episode, actually.
Yeah, probably.
That it still helps, even if it's not a kid in your class, you're teaching them to be more accepting of kids, of people they'll encounter.
And also that there are safe adults.
And they're safe adults.
They may not be consciously thinking, oh yes, Heather's a safe adult, but the cumulative experience of being in the presence of an intentionally safe adult, I think is another sort of honor and heavy responsibility that we have as early educators.
And it occurs to me that this relates back to democracy. If we value every member of our community, right, even if 15 of those members are 2.5 years old, right, if that's the culture we create in our classroom, then those moments are moved through so much easier. Well, they go hand in hand. Those moments are so much easier because we already have created a culture where everyone counts. But then also once we've had those conversations, it even enriches the times when we all do need to decide something democratically.
Mhm.
Yeah.
All right.
So the moral of the story is read this book.
Yes.
Oh yeah. And it's a quick read.
Right. I was
Yeah,
just going to
really
say we said it in the first episode too. It's not long and it's fun to read in addition to
Yeah.
being sort of really deep and powerful. There it is.
And
Thanks,
it's on
Richard.
magic paper. Like I was highlighting everything and I think, oh, this whole thing's gonna be bright
Yeah.
yellow. And I went back
Yeah.
and it's like, I could barely
That's
see the high.
a new trend in publishing. So I'll just say this to exchange to Red Leaf. My highlighting fades. It's a real problem for me.
I think that you two are part of some highlighting Illuminati, like some massive global highlighter corporation.
Yeah.
And you're just trying to,
Yeah. And don't
Sell
tell me
more
to
highlighters.
use blue instead of yellow because that's not going to happen. It's
Wow.
only yellow highlighters for me. And I don't want it to fade.
well, now that's a mental health issue.
Very probably, but that doesn't change the fact that that's how I want it to be.
Okay,
Yes, we want to be inclusive for those.
That's right, Richard.
this is true. Sorry.
All right. All right. Any last things? This has been so good. I feel like.
I think same thing of reading the book. You know, I could have taken a quote from any page probably
Yeah.
in the book and we could have had an hour-long conversation.
Exactly. That's what I kept thinking as I was reading. I was like, this could be like 17 podcasts, but we'll try to.
But what I would also say to people is, it's not the greatest book ever, right?
Right.
But it hits on a few points that made me want to talk to somebody else about them. It's really not about digesting his wisdom and you come away having learned new stuff.
Yeah.
For me, it was about, oh, these are some really good points that intrigue me. Gosh, I wish I could talk
Yeah.
to somebody else
And
about it.
he does
It's
give
almost
some
like he was
definitions.
opening a can of worms.
Yes. So, but you know, a lot of childcare programs will do a book club
Yeah.
with the teachers there. This is a great book to do at your childcare program, like for a, you know, like at our next staff meeting, we're all going to talk about this book because it's a really fast read,
Mhm.
but it hits on great conversation topics for a room full of early childhood educators.
Yeah. But we'll leave you with questions too, I think, which is probably part of the purpose of it because, you know, we said in the last episode, it's part of that of Exchanges Reimagining Our Work series. And those books really tend to not be, you know, answers between the covers, but more here is a challenge to the way you've thought about doing your job, you know, and here's a new way of thinking about things. But also there is good information, but it's also a challenge.
Yes. I would also add for any like directors or anyone thinking about doing a book club, at the very back of this book, there's a study guide. That if you're like uncomfortable facilitating this conversation with your staff, there's literally a study guide with topics and questions you could use.
I'm already planning on using this book because we are adding toddler rooms. After COVID, we had to close down a bunch and suddenly we have these 3 rooms. So there's going to be all these new toddler teachers. And we were really like, we want toddler teachers who want to be toddler teachers. So
I want to be a toddler teacher. Open a Lafayette
I think
branch.
we still have one more opening.
Well, I don't know that I'm moving at this point in my life.
No,
But
you're academia now.
I know, but I already miss the kids. Okay, well, thank you both. And thanks to Nick for writing the book and Exchange for giving us all copies of it so we could discuss it.
Yes, thank you.
That's one of my favorite things about podcasting, if I'm honest. Like every book.
Don't be honest.
And you still spend a lot of money on books.
And I still buy a lot of books. They're probably like, yeah, she's going to buy 5 for every one we give her. So go ahead and keep giving her books. All right. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody for listening. Come back again for another episode. Bye.